Hello, class, and welcome to today's science class. As we were studying in the previous classes, the Earth has two movements, rotation and revolution. And the Moon has the two same movements, rotation and revolution. And during this class, we are going to see what happens every time that the Moon moves. And we're going to see the different phases of the Moon. Also, we're going to learn some interesting facts about the Moon. So let's go and learn. Today, chicos, we are going to be learning about the Moon and its movement. So, here there are some interesting facts that we're going to learn about. The first one is that the Moon is a dusty ball of rock. Interesting, it's made up of rocks, measuring 3,476 kilometers in a diameter. That's roughly a quarter of the size of the Earth. So that means that the Moon is smaller than the Earth. Even though it may seem that it's bigger or of the same size, actually it is smaller than the Earth. Number two, its surface is home to mountains, huge craters, and flat plains called seas, made of hardened lava. Also, the Moon is the Earth's only natural satellite, a celestial body that orbits the planet. And its orbit around our planet is shaped like a slightly squashed circle known as an ellipse. So that means that the Moon is always going around the Earth because orbits our planet. Number four, it takes from 27, scientists have different numbers regarding this, but they say that it takes from 27 to 29 days for the Moon to travel around the Earth and complete its orbit. Actually, the two movements of the Moon, which are the same of the Earth, take the same amount of time, from 27 to 29 days. Number five, although the Moon shines bright in the sky, chicos, we need to remember that the Moon doesn't produce its own light. Every time that we see the Moon and that it shines, it is actually reflecting the light from the sun. So don't forget that. Number six, ever notice how the Moon appears to change shape each night? That's because as the Moon orbits the Earth, the sun lights up different parts of its surface. So it's just our view of the Moon that is changing, but not the Moon itself. The Moon, it's always going to be the same, guys. What happens is that the sunlight hits different parts of the Moon. Number seven, as the Moon travels, it rotates on its own axis, just like our planet, like we saw in the previous class. It takes roughly the same amount of time for the Moon to make a full rotation as it does for it to complete its orbit. That means, if you remember, in the Earth, their rotation was 24 hours and the revolution was 365 days. But in the case of the Moon, that time it's exactly the same. That means that their rotation and the revolution takes around from 27 to 29 days. And that's why we only see around 60% of the Moon's surface from Earth. The part that faces Earth is known as the near side and the other the far side. That means that we haven't seen the whole Moon. There is a part that is hiding and that we cannot see because the movement of the Moon doesn't allow us to see that part of the Moon. Then number 8 says that the temperature on the Moon varies from super hot to super cold. When the sun hits its surface, temperatures can reach a scorching 127 degrees Celsius. But when the sun goes down, temperatures can plummet to around minus 153 degrees Celsius. And number 9, like Earth, the moon has gravity, the force that pulls things towards the ground. But the moon's gravity is weaker. It's only 1/6 of the Earth's gravity. In fact, that means that you would weigh much less if you were to stand on the moon. So these are some interesting facts that we can learn about the moon. Movements of the moon. As I told you before, the moon has the same movements that the Earth has. Rotation when it moves in its own axis, and revolution or translation when it moves around the Earth, as you can see it here. These movements, they are done at the same time. They take place at the same time, and they take from 27, 28 days to 29 days. And that's the reason why we call a month every time that we have around that number of days, 20 days to 30, 31 days. Interesting, right? So chicos, these movements of the moon produce the phases of the moon, and that's what we're going to be learning today, the phases of the moon. So as you can see here, we have different phases of the moon, and I am sure that you have seen some of those phases. The first phase is the new moon. As you can see here, the moon orbits around the Earth, and the Earth orbits around the sun, as we saw it before. So this sunlight, as we saw it before too, the moon doesn't produce its own light. It only reflects the light from the sun. So according to the position of the moon, we are going to see a different moon. So if you see in this picture here, we have the sunlight that comes from the sun. The first part of the moon phase, it's the new moon. In the new moon, it's when the moon is exactly in the middle of the Earth and the sun. And we cannot see the moon because at that moment, it's invisible to us. This is the new moon. That's what we see. Los dibujitos de afuera es como nosotros los vemos realmente en la Tierra. Los de adentro es lo que está pasando entre la luz, la Tierra y la Luna, ¿verdad? Entonces, the new moon, that's what we see. We see nothing, actually. Because all the light that is being reflected into the moon, we cannot see it. But then, as the moon starts moving, we can see the waxing present. Waxing means increasing, o sea, que empieza a crecer. En este caso, que la luz que empieza a ser reflejada empieza a crecer, empieza a ser más. After some days, the moon starts or continues moving, and we have the first quarter. More sunlight is reflected, and we can see, like what some people say, half moon, la mitad de la luna, half of the moon. Then when the moon continues moving, we have the waxing gibbous. The waxing gibbous. This is almost the full moon, but not yet. Then after some days, we can see the full moon. Why is that we can see the full moon? Because all the sunlight from the sun, it's being reflected into the moon, and we can see the full moon. Actually, remember that we're not seeing the whole moon. We are just seeing one side of the moon, because the other side, we cannot see it, as you see it here in this part of the drawing. We cannot see it. We are just seeing one side of the moon. Then, after this full moon, what starts to happen is that the sunlight that is reflected, it starts to decrease. and that it's called the waning gibbous. Waning, it's decreasing, o sea, empieza a disminuir. The waning gibbous, we see just part of the moon. Then we have the third quarter. This is the same cycle, but now we're going back to the new moon. Ahora empieza otra vez la luna, en lugar de crecer, empieza a hacerse pequeñita. Lo que nosotros vemos, ¿verdad, chicos? Porque la luna sigue manteniendo su tamaño. So we have the third quarter, then the waning crescent, waning, decreases, empieza a disminuir, and finally we have the new moon, in which we don't see anything. So, chicos, if you see the start of the phases of the moon, it's when we don't see the moon. But then in the middle of the phases of the moon is when we see the full moon. So these are the different phases of the moon when it moves around the earth. We have new moon, waxing crescent, first quarter, waxing gibbous, the full moon, the waning gibbous, the third quarter, and the waning crescent. All this depends in the position of the moon and the sunlight that is being reflected at that specific moment. Chicos, so remember once more, the earth orbits around the sun and the moon orbits around the earth. So the different phases of the moon depends on the movement of the moon around the earth, and also on the reflection of the sunlight that comes from the sun. So in the first case, we have the new moon, in which we don't see any light reflected on the moon. The moon is invisible to us. Then we have the waxing crescent, in which some light of the sun can be seen by us in the moon. Remember that waxing is increasing. Then we have the first quarter, in which we see half of the moon. Then we have the waxing gibbous, in which we almost have the full moon. And then we have the full moon. Full moon. We can see the side of the moon that we're able to see, right? Because we cannot see the whole moon. Then we have the waning gibbous. Waning is that it starts to decrease. So the sunlight that is reflected and that we can see starts to decrease. Then we have the last quarter, which is half moon again, the waning crescent, and finally the new moon. Remember that this takes approximately 28 to 29 days. The moon going around the earth and moving in itself. Chicos, and here I have something that I want to show you. This is the calendar. This is the calendar of November 2020. So if you want to see the moon, here is the calendar of how the moon phases are going to occur during this month in November 2020. You can look at also the calendar of December and the next year to see how the moon it's gonna be seen in each of the days. So if you want to see full moon during November, you would have to go outside the 25, 27, 28, 29, and 30, in which we're going to have a full moon. To finish, guys, I want to show you this project that you are going to do today. You are going to recreate, the moon phases. If you see, this was done with cookies, so you can do it with cookies too. You can recreate the phases of the moon with cookies. So you are going to recreate the moon phases as you want to. Here is an example using cookies, and then you will send it back to me so I can check it. So, chicos, I hope that you enjoyed today's class and that you learn a little bit more about the moon. As you can see it here, I have the different phases of the moon. And I hope that you enjoyed the class. Bye bye and have a nice day. See you.